Let me make just a few opening comments. The first is that I understand that Bishop Sullivan is experiencing serious health issues at the moment. I want to extend my best wishes to his family and to the bishop himself. I hope he makes a speedy recovery. I do understand how stress can affect the body, and I think it's an unfortunate circumstance. So my well wishes are with him personally and his family. I also just want to take a moment to focus on the family that was displaced here as a result of the building collapse. You have a major disruption for this poor family. You have kids taken out of school. You have a mother who has lost her job. You have a family who's experienced the destruction of their pool and their garage. And they're all very anxious and concerned. The city has been reaching out from the beginning to try and provide them with a level of comfort and clarity in terms of the process. Dave Botero has been assisting us with issues of translation. Our housing department made a city-owned property available in the short term for their relocation. And we're very pleased that the injunction was agreed voluntarily to be lifted today, and that demolition will continue and the family will be able to return to their home quickly. I just also wanted to make the point, and I might take any questions, that I know a lot of focus has been placed on the circumstances of the building collapse and that particular evening. But the reality is Bishop Sullivan had a variety of warrants out for his arrest on that evening, and that if he had been pulled over for speeding, he would have been arrested. If he'd been pulled over for running a red light, he would have been arrested. He had outstanding warrants not only for codes violations on the property in question, but also for harassment, for driving with a suspended license, etc. And those outstanding warrants would have resulted in his arrest, regardless of whether or not the building collapsed. And those additional charges that were brought that evening were really just additional charges. He would have been arrested had we not placed those additional charges that evening as a circumstance of the building collapse. The city is working closely to make sure that the demolition continues safely. There was a real issue with that injunction that perhaps the building was less stable than ever before, and I think that's brought added stress and anxiety to the family. We're going to be returning to the demolition and making sure that that is done swiftly. And I know that there is some desire to make this into a clash of personalities. I bear no individual any ill will. I have never viewed this through any sort of political lens. I don't consider Bishop Sullivan an enemy in any way. In fact, we've had good conversations subsequent to the campaign in my election, which did not discuss the building, but discussed other opportunities for collaboration. So I am puzzled that any would see this as some sort of a personality conflict. As you all know, as recently as the Tuesday or Wednesday before the building collapse, we had a town hall forum, a Harrisburg Next forum, right here in the atrium of City Hall. And I mentioned, and you can review the tape, I mentioned all three of those charges as potential misdemeanor charges that we would bring against as a means of helping us in our war against blight. I also talked very specifically about how we were going to be doing active warrant sweeps and arresting individuals with outstanding arrest warrants, and that was going to be part of a new Get Tough on Blight initiative and strategy. And frankly, as we released to the media a few weeks ago, Reverend Sullivan's name was on a list of sort of 11 individuals that had the largest number of outstanding warrants. That list was put together, and the police department was working on that in coordination with codes weeks before this happened, and we didn't have any direct conversation about who was on that list or who shouldn't be on that list or whatever. I just simply gave the directive that we need to take the fight on blight seriously. And that is what has happened. That's what we're doing. And I would like us to try and look forward towards positive, collaborative solutions. It seems to me that too much time and energy has already been expended in arguing about things which shouldn't be our focus. Our focus should be working collectively to reduce blight in the city and to deal with real public safety and quality of life issues for all of our residents. And I would welcome the opportunity to work with the NAACP, work with the IMC on positive, forward-looking initiatives that will help improve our community. So our door is open. I see no impediment to that based on the circumstances here. This was an unfortunate occurrence. There's no question about it. The timing of it was dictated by the collapse of a building, by natural causes, by a long history that involved more than just the neglect of this particular building. And that's how we've gotten to where we are. I did try and reserve comment over the past 48 hours because there were two hearings, one criminal, one civil, and it was the advice of our solicitor to always respect the judges and not try and influence their decisions. As you know, the one was continued, and the other didn't even require the judge weighing in. We reached a voluntary agreement with the other counsel to release the injunction. So that's all very positive, and I think we're working well together, and we will continue to work well together to address these issues in the future. So with that, I am happy to take any questions that you all may have. Dave.
What was your first knowledge of knowing of Mr. Sullivan's arrest?
My first knowledge of knowing of his arrest, I was informed on the night of Bishop Sullivan's arrest by the fire chief that his building had collapsed, that this church had collapsed, that it was owned by Bishop Sullivan. I was not told he was going to be arrested. I did not have any contact at all with the police department, but I was told that the building had collapsed. I did not know the full history of the outstanding warrants that were there for Bishop Sullivan. Even on the Monday after, I didn't know until very recently that there were outstanding warrants for things other than codes violations. On Monday morning, we pulled the outstanding warrants for the codes violations, but it was only just recently that I've learned of the harassment warrant and the driving with a suspended license warrant. Those warrants were in the Metro system and were any officer would have seen them. As I say, if he'd been pulled over for speeding or running a red light, he would have been arrested on that. There's nothing unusual that's happened here. There's not been any targeting of a particular individual. We're just dealing with an unfortunate circumstance, and the community really ought to rally together and use this as an opportunity for a collaborative, positive discussion about blight.
Now, how is it explained to you with the police procedure-wise, and Chief Carter maybe explain this to you, why he was taken from his residence to the actual scene? Now, I understand why he couldn't drive there himself with his suspended driver's license, but why wasn't he just arrested in his home?
This makes a lot of sense to me as standard procedure. I can tell you, as a property owner in the city, when I have had a burglar alarm at the bookstore, the police have been called because the alarm's been triggered, or at our warehouse when the sprinkler alarm has gone off and the fire department has arrived. I have received calls and requests to meet the fire department, to meet the police. It is standard procedure as a building owner to be asked to come to the scene of an event or of a building collapse. Bishop Sullivan could have had information that could have been useful. He could have known something about whether or not there were squatters in the building, or something about whether or not there was recent work that had been going on, or even something as basic as keys or access to aspects of the building. There's nothing at all unusual about that. And he went voluntarily. He was asked if he would come to the scene, just like another property owner would be asked to come to the scene. And I don't see anything surprising or unusual about that. In fact, I've had it happen in my own experience. Maybe you all have had it happen as well.
I guess the only question is, I don't really know how or if you can resolve this, but this printout that we got, this is just, this is what I guess the police saw in terms of outstanding warrants.
That's what the police,
name, right?
yes, that's what the police would have seen at the time. Now, there were 3 additional charges that were brought that evening that are not on here. I don't remember exactly what each of the 3 were, but those were added. And then there were also additional warrants that were not in the system, that were codes related that they wouldn't have seen at the time. But this is what they would have seen at the time.
Okay.
And okay.
So that Monday morning, I downloaded, I think, everything that I could find, and running his name through the docket, and all of this, like, the harassment charge was closed, it looks like, as of sometime in 1999 when he paid everything off. So maybe it's a record-keeping error, but I'm just sort of letting you know the discrepancies why I was kind of confused about the sequence of events and what the actual charges were that he was arrested on and when those were determined, because this is what they saw, but it was already closed. So
they weren't closed in the system. They were active, open warrants at the time. I don't know what you saw. I'm happy to try and get you in contact with the police, but
maybe it's a question for the DJ. I don't know.
It is possible that that sounds like a good question for the DJ. It is possible that in some instances, as I've learned, you can work out a plan to resolve these issues with the district justice, for instance, a payment plan. And that's what happened in Sullivan's case with the codes violations. He had a payment plan in place for a long period of time, and at some point in 2013, that seems to have fallen apart, and then the warrants began being issued again. So these are old warrants, but at any point in time, if you're not responsive, or if you don't live up to the arrangements that you've made with the district justice, they can be reactivated.
Well, given that he's such a public figure here in Harrisburg, why wasn't he arrested sooner?
Well, that is, I think, a perfectly reasonable question. All I can tell you is that when I came to office, I said we have to do something about arresting individuals with large numbers of outstanding warrants. And that was said without any knowledge of Sullivan or how many warrants he had. As I say, it was said publicly to, I think, great support at the forum we had that very week. And it just so happens that he was on that list, and this was the moment in which he came in contact with law enforcement and he was arrested.
Do you feel his status and maybe prior relationships prevented his arrest?
I have no comment on that. All I know is that when we took office, we made it a priority to enforce the laws and to make arrests and to fight blight. And that's what I knew.
So it's a list of outstanding warrants against Bishop Sullivan
that were in the system on the night of his arrest.
And that's why he was arrested.
Yes. In addition, there were also 3 charges that were made that evening, but these were other outstanding warrants.
Well, regardless of the charges that evening, would he have been arrested
Yes.
on these charges?
That's what I'm saying.
I'm not going to ask you this, but do you know what the dates are on these by chance? I mean, I think you answered the question on why he wasn't arrested. I mean, he started long before you took office, I suppose.
There's a long-standing, voluminous history of back and forth regarding this. I'm just trying to give you a perspective from the standpoint of the police officer on the night of the scene. As I say, if you'd run a stoplight, they would have pulled this up in the system, and he would have been arrested. There were additional charges that we placed that evening, but he would have been arrested had the building not collapsed and he'd been pulled over for another charge.
What about your request or demand that he reimburse the city for the demolition costs?
I don't believe I've made any demands. I think that's the wrong word. I think that he must reimburse the city for the costs. I mean, that's just a standard procedure. That's going to be something that we can work out between his lawyer and the city solicitor. But that's pretty standard. If you have a condemned property and the city is forced to come in and demolish that property, the property owner will get billed the costs. Now, the reality is, oftentimes people will go bankrupt, very limited times that the city's ever really able to recoup monies. But in this instance, I think the IMC and the NAACP have made representations that they're able to raise money, and I think that would be wonderful. I think that would be a great resolution for this, would be to have everybody work together to try and reimburse the city for the demolition costs, because this has been a major drain on city resources. So there's nothing unusual about assessing those costs to an individual. What might be unusual in this case is that we might actually be able to reimburse the city, which I think would be a terrific thing if everybody worked together.
Mayor, I just have one
Okay.
off-topic conversation, question. I know Megan Healy's working on a story about the Broad Street Market.
Okay.
I believe she's speaking with the board this evening. Just from your perspective, I know you put together a task force,
Mhm.
but I think she wanted me to ask you, do you really feel that something can be done to the Broad Street Market to really revitalize the market's charm and really bring it to a business hub here in Harrisburg?
Oh, I absolutely do. And I know from the task force that there have been a lot of discussions taking place with additional funding sources, whether it's the agricultural department or whether it's other avenues for state funding to support the Broad Street Market. There have been a lot of people involved in conversation, and I think that not only can it improve, but if it does, it'll be a tremendous draw and another really positive generator of good commerce for especially that section of the city. So we're all supportive of it. And I believe the task force has a public meeting coming up, as you know, and they've been meeting regularly here and having serious conversations about the market's future. All right then, thank you all very much. I appreciate your time.
Warren